Welcome to the Cartoon Pad. Today's episode, we're going to have a special guest, the New Yorker cartoonist, David Borchart. And my co-host made it, Michael Shaw, and our trusty producer, Marty.
I'm so sorry, Bob. Traffic was horrible.
Now let's exchange pleasantries before we start the show. Today's show is going to be about the passing of George Booth. But first, Michael, how was your day?
I'd rather not talk about it. How about you, Bob?
Well, I learned that my wife was right. She was not in the mood to put up Christmas lights. And I also learned that if you throw lights, Christmas lights, when they're plugged in, when they explode and they pop, it's actually quite dangerous. So that was my afternoon.
We talked about that, about the Christmas lights that you use, those old glass, heavy,
I use the old vintage ones. They're mustard colored, they have muted colors, they have that beautiful color, and when they break, it's quite a pop.
Yeah, they
shatter. And my wife was
and
really pissed.
They cut you, and you step on them.
Yep.
Did you?
Also, it's on the roof of the house.
Did you two have a fight with broken Christmas lights like shivs in prison?
Like Santa and the reindeer, so that they.
Yes, hello, David.
Like
sorry, I should have waited to be introduced.
Yeah, David, how was your day?
Well, I was sitting, as you see me here, in front of my computer, working from home on my graphic design job. So, kind of miserable, but
glad to hear it.
It's gotten like 1,000% better now that it's done, and I'm sitting here with you guys.
Well,
good. You know, I've never met you, sir. Hello.
Hello. So nice to meet
you.
I've heard your voice on your podcast here many times.
Yeah, I sound just like Pee Wee Herman on crack, so thank you.
Oh, yes, I remember when he was on crack.
Yeah.
You're very excited.
You have a very tidy studio. I'm very impressed.
Well, thank you. It took about 20 years to tweak it up into the way I wanted. We were talking about our leaving Park Slope, and we finally got this great apartment where my wife, Sharon Mesmer, is a poet. She has her gorgeous workroom at one end of the apartment, and then about 60 yards away on the floor through, here I am with my palatial workroom here.
So is your studio contiguous to your apartment?
Yes. Yeah,
it's 60 yards.
No, it's not 60 yards.
Oh, you were joshing.
I was giganticizing things. I was supersizing things for dramatic effect.
So you're a Missourian, a native Missourian?
I am, yes, from St. Louis.
So we're the mighty KMOX.
Now, you're a native Missourian? No.
Are you kidding?
Yes. No, I'm not kidding.
I'm flummoxed. Yes, I was born in the rolling foothills of the Ozarks in Hillsborough, Missouri. Wandered into St. Louis. Got my BFA in painting from Webster University. Go Gorlocks! And taught for 4 to 5 years in the St. Louis Public School District. Lived in the CWE and left when they couldn't make a Valium big enough. And wandered over to the University of Missouri, Columbia, got my master's degree in journalism, and it's been all downhill since then.
Well, that sounds perfect. That's interesting about the Ozarks. I mean, I spent most of my, summers of my childhood at my grandparents' house in Williamsville, which is just about 20 minutes from the Arkansas border at the bottom of Missouri.
And now, David, do you know what part of Missouri Mr. Booth came from?
Amesville? Does that ring a bell?
I think it was Fairfax.
I don't know. I've been reading so many, little.
I was trying to catch up too. He was far northwest corner. Yeah,
he was completely. I mean, in terms of like where my grandparents lived in Williamsville, he was all the way on the. They were sort of in the southeast. He was all the way in the northwest.
Yes. So in our part of, we were Missouri, and George Booth would have been Missouri.
Yeah, well, my mother would kill me if she heard me saying Missouri. she did not. She always referred to it as Missouri.
Yes. As I always say, if you call it Missouri, why don't you call it Mississippi?
Yeah, Missouri is wrong.
Yes,
Let's just face it.
It's like
Sorry
a
to
dog.
all you Missourians out there.
It's actually a dog whistle, I think.
Or a shibboleth. Look that up, folks.
That too. That's a good one.
Who would guess that it's a hotbed for New Yorker cartoonists?
Well, Charles Barzotti worked for Hallmark, but I don't know if he was born in Missouri.
No, Michael, I think he moved there because he got that job.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought Hallmark was in Cleveland or something.
No, it's in St.
sir.
Louis. No.
Leave the room.
Yeah, come on. Dave.
No, I'm going from the old Robert Crumb comics where he's working for Hallmark.
And then
David, maybe it's American Greetings.
David, then you had a bunch of other cartoonists that way. You have Jack Ziegler moved out to St. Louis, right?
No.
Yeah.
No.
For a time, sure. He moved out there. He was like not far from Versailles.
Was he having problems? Was he?
Wait.
Bizardi.
Barsotti?
Thank you.
Bizarro.
Sorry, one too many false staffs. This is a late night for me.
A lot of syllables.
A lot of syllables. No, that's Kansas City.
Well, isn't that in Missouri?
Yeah, but they're like 6 hours from each other.
They are pretty far from each other.
Back then, that's just a hop, skip, and a jump.
Don't you remember the I-70 series, the Royals and the Cardinals?
Of course, I was there for that.
Yeah,
Second base.
Lord.
Ball went right between my legs. Fourth inning, changed the whole
That's
series.
right. No, it was the call. I forgot who did it, but Cardinals lost in seven games.
Oh, I want to say George Brett, right?
No, George Brett was gone by then. I think. That's all right. I'm sorry. I'm digressing. Bob, please take over.
What a surprise.
I know.
So, David, we have you as a guest on because we want to have you as a regular guest at some point and really get deep dive into your work and stuff.
Right. Well, I'll try to be as regular as I can while I'm here.
Yeah. But
we have Michael Shaw, who's our irregular guest.
Yes, but I had my fiber today, so I'm on track.
Well, that's good.
Waiting for that one.
Yes, thank you.
David,
I'm waiting for something too.
David, we have you on to share any memories you could willing to share about Mr. George Booth.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I've just been reading all of everybody's memories and, whatnot on Michael Maslin's site, on Inkspill, and just in general on Facebook. It's just so, I can't think of too many other, even when Gay and Wilson died, there wasn't this kind of deep affection that I'm seeing for George. And I guess in terms of having a connection, it wasn't just we both came from Missouri. George, I think, said Missouri. But, we met at the New Yorker in the Ready Room, in the Cartoon Lounge, and hit it off famously. George sounded just like all of my uncles and relatives from Missouri. He could have been my Uncle Walter or my Uncle Conway. They had similar senses of humor, actually. And, we would talk every time. And then we started, visiting outside of the confines. I would go over to their apartment. We had George and his daughter, Sarah, up to our house in Pennsylvania several times. And we actually got quite familiar. And it was just wonderful. George and Sarah is also wonderful. And Dion, who sadly died just the week before George. It was obviously no coincidence. As soon as she was gone, I think George sensed it. And that, Sarah was saying they were sort of in a race. And so I just wanted to put in a word for Dion too, because she was such a delightful part of that, that little family in that apartment, and her stories are amazing. and we kept trying to get her to write her memories down. I'm sure Sarah, can fill in. And frankly, if you ever got Sarah Booth on as a guest, you would just you get a world of stories, because she grew up in this cartoon family. She knew Charles Addams from family outings. They would all hang out together. So yeah, I think I got to know George and the crew pretty well. Twice he left our house in the country packing my pajamas that I lent him. So
we won't go into that.
Yes.
I knew Sarah through the New York Times.
Oh yeah, no, Sarah.
Yeah, we worked together. And so
on the Times
just let people know listening. She works for the New York Times, and she's been caretaking for her mom and dad for many years, and had this Herculaneum task, and she really is to be commended.
Yes, I think that sums it up well. It was in the last year and a half, maybe, had become pretty enormous. You've got two parents who are ailing, but they were ailing, but we saw them, at the end of August, early September, and it was, they looked good. They were up and around, both still telling stories. So, really the decline was very fast. In a way, if you were going to go, what a way to go. You're the person you've loved and been married to for 65 plus years is there with you right to the end. I would love to be that lucky.
Yeah, we should all shove off at 96 being beloved by the cartoon universe and have a current cartoon in the New Yorker.
Yes.
I'll take that any day.
Well, actually, me and Michael are racing ourselves. We are, me and Michael are racing who's going to pass or who's going to kill each other first.
Oh, well, then it's more of a duel than a race, really.
Yes.
Well, you're picking tomato.
So, George, I want to know, George was like this, he seemed like the most cheerful cartoonist I could imagine. His work was never, unlike mine, was never it got a little dark once in a while. If some of my favorite George cartoons are a little dark, but they had this kind of incessant optimism in the face of like zany, off-kilter, chaotic universe.
Oh, totally. There was, you never felt endangered in his cartoons. You never felt like you were going to be slipping into the darkness.
Well, there's one where it's really funny. I could draw a line from Charles Addams to George Booth, which most people wouldn't think actually occurred. But there's a cartoon I saw where this guy's about to commit suicide by hanging himself, and his wife comes in and goes, no, not my macrame. He's trying to hang himself from a macrame.
That's so Charles Addams, or whoever was writing for Charles Addams.
Well, that's George Booth. That's a George Booth cartoon.
That's a George Booth.
Oh, that is no. I'm saying, but that's so like unto Charles Addams.
Right. Did George Booth have people write for him?
I don't think he ever took an idea from. I
didn't think so either.
He's so distinct. I can't really picture writing for him. Although he did offer me a cartoon idea at one point.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which well, you remember, Bob, when the Milford Readers and Writers Festival was in 2018, you and I and Chris Wyant were on a panel up there.
Right.
And we had gotten
to invite George.
Yes. And so I had asked George and Sarah, they came up and were staying with us, and they sat in for our panel at the Milford Theater.
Where we introduced him to the audience.
Yes.
We made a point of making clear that he was in our presence. He made his big bow. He got a huge hand. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. And, well, he had come up the day before we appeared. He had turned into sort of a late in the day Alan Alda fan, watching MASH reruns. And Alan Alda was giving a panel. He was giving a talk. actually a really good talk too.
It was a great talk, and I got a chance to meet him afterwards. We were right after each other.
Yeah. So, I was, Sharon and I were there with Sarah and George. He enjoyed it a lot. We afterwards were going to dinner with some local friends, and we had stopped at a different house, really to use the bathroom. But it was this beautiful house our friends have in the middle of the meadow, built out over a pond. George came out of the bathroom, and they had this beautiful living room with a fireplace. He was looking at the fireplace, and he said, "Here's an idea for you. I'll give this one to you." He was just looking at the fireplace and riffing. He said, "There's this fireplace, and there's these 4 armchairs in front of the fireplace. And above the fireplace, you've got these deer heads mounted." He's sort of visualizing it as he's going along. And 3 of the armchairs have these old guys there. Each of them is like reading a newspaper or a magazine. And the 4th armchair is empty. And you look up above the fireplace, you see that, like, past all the stuffed deer heads, the 4th guy's head is mounted up on the wall. And there's no caption. And off to the side, now this is important. I can tell I'm imitating George as best I can.
This is important.
And this is off to the side, there's a dog. And the dog is looking at them with a disapproving look. And he was like, at this point, he was like laughing because the dog with a disapproving look, it cracked us up. It's cracking me up now. Because that was sort of like for him the most important detail. It wasn't a great cartoon, and maybe it could have used a caption, but he was just like sort of, extemporizing.
Well, he was the only cartoonist that would just stick an American Terrier in the middle of a cartoon staring at you.
But this dog was staring at the men and looking disapproving.
Yes, I could see that.
The only artist today, I think, comes the closest to George's completeness of details and little things going on within a setting is David. I don't think
thank
David,
you, but I would love it if that was true.
Well, yeah, I don't think you guys' styles is totally similar, but you do have that beautiful drawing style that you pay attention to all the detail, to different corners of your drawing. You have little details that are really you can go back into and really enjoy, like you did with his. I mean, I was wondering if that became sort of a thing that you did after being such a fan of George's.
Well, George and I think that like a difference between either our generation or maybe just me personally in terms of the magazine. I never saw New Yorker when I was a kid. My parents didn't go to college. We didn't have the New Yorker sitting around the house. We went to a lot of yard sales, a lot of, especially in St. Louis, which is where I got my first cartoon books. And was my introduction to the New Yorker cartoon. And that's how they all were. My first New Yorker, actually one of my first cartoon books I ever bought was this Petty Pace by Mary Petty, which I can reach over and about 3 feet away and pull it up for you. This is the one I bought at a stoop sale in St. Louis, probably in about 1963. So here it is.
Oh my!
Wow!
I like this. For Carl, love Theodore. Oh, for Carl from Theodore, Christmas 1945. But Mary Petty.
Mary Petty.
Incredible, intricate style, and the layouts of her cartoons are just phenomenal.
Yeah, I would say that Booth reminds me of George Price in that you could just look at the drawing, and the caption is usually something completely different, and it didn't matter what the caption was because it's like chrysanthemums, marigolds, what's next? Rose of Sharon, and like it's the guy in the bathtub saying that, and there's 69 cats there.
Right.
Michael, his expressions, Price and Booth both had great expressions on the faces. So you were already laughing before you even knew what the joke was.
Yeah. And
No,
they were
Booth had
often,
great
yeah.
expressions. I agree with that. I mean, his people look flummoxed, and their eyes are going in different directions.
Yeah.
And it looks like there's a little inbreeding going on, and that
Yeah,
might
well,
be
we're all from Missouri, so
Yeah, exactly.
My favorite Booth cartoon, David, you were describing it almost. It's a front yard just filled with junk everywhere. He just put hundreds of different things all over the yard. A sink, tires, boxes, and everything. And it's a yard sale with a sign that says "More inside."
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, this is something Sarah's going to have to deal with, because apparently their house in Stony Brook, her mom, Dion, who I cannot emphasize how much I adore her, but she was a little bit of a hoarder, and probably there was a little bit of drawn from life in that. She also said that Dion also said that she had come up with the caption about the woman bringing the sandwich out to the writer husband on the deck of the
I just looked at that one. That one seemed kind of like George being hep for the times, because George always was stuck in about 1952 for me.
Right. Well,
Stony Brook's way out on Long Island. Just to point that out, it's a town that's on the northern shore.
Yeah, and it's going to be challenging, I'm sure, but Dion and George, I mean, the three of them lived together in that apartment. First, the old apartment on the other side of Brooklyn, then they got kicked out of that when they were evicted, thrown out on the street.
Why?
They wanted to, upgrade, sell the building, sell the apartments.
Oh, really?
Make a fortune.
So you have to. I'm sorry, I stepped on that caption. So do you have it in front of you?
I wish I had.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Do you remember it, David?
I can find it right now.
Yes.
Yeah, Michael.
I have my Omnibooth here.
Yeah.
Yes.
David, I actually gave you one of the books I found in a weird flea market, just like the one I described. I brought it to you at one of our meetings. You and me meet. We should.
I can reach over and grab that one too. Actually, you gave me both of these to hang on to. Rehearsals Off and Pussycats Need Love.
Oh, I have rehearsals off, but not put. George talks about pussies a lot, and it's just a funny thing to say. But he would have a caption that would be like, "Here, pussy, 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 pussy," and that was it. And there'd be like 95 cats there, all staring at him.
I think, though, that it did not mean maybe what.
No, it doesn't. But it's just funny that he would kind of go with that absurdist, kind of caption to go with the absurdist illustration.
No, the words, the captions were so amazing too. And of course, he was famous for some very, very long captions.
I have a great caption that I found up that I thought was a great cartoon, because I was looking through some George Booth cartoons in my big fat red
you have the red book.
And if you go through the appendix of this and you do it by artist, Booth probably he's in there with a stack of, like, he's in so many of the cartoons, like in the appendix. Like, I would say him and only like a couple other people in the entire book have as many cartoons in it as he does. But this was a great cartoon that I liked so much. And something about the tone of, maybe it's the Midwestern, similar to Shaw, and also similar to, I'm putting together a book with Nick Downs right now, similar to this very, and David, I was looking at one of your cartoons actually just right now on my other screen, and similar to your sense of humor, which is very kind of blunt, kind of like a very blunt humor. And it's not sensitive to people's needs or worry. You're just like, this is a joke and it's funny, and this is the joke. And the cartoon that I'm looking at of yours, David, is a therapist with a gun and a shattered window and bullets going through it, and his patient's on the couch, and he says, "I'm afraid I can't discuss my other patients," as he's like defending himself from one of his other patients shooting at him.
Oh my God. You know what? That was a caption contest, and that caption is similar to the one I had submitted, but that was actually the caption.
Wow.
That's not your caption?
No, my caption for that cartoon that I submitted was, we're not here to discuss my problems.
Oh.
That's funny.
I sort of prefer mine, but I like the caption contest caption a lot too. But they pop up in the stream, and there's no indication that was somebody else's caption.
Well, you captured the zeitgeist.
They're selling this other caption on art.com for your cartoon.
Oh no, those captions, all the caption contest caption cartoons get shuffled in with the rest of your.
Oh really?
Yeah, and
I think you still get paid though.
You still get paid. I mean,
Yeah.
I was on the cover of one of the New Yorker. It was like their calendar of business cartoons. It was a bunch of people in a conference room, a bunch of executive twisting the night away.
Oh yeah, I remember you working on that.
Yeah, and they had it on. That ended up being a caption contest. And they had it as the cover of the calendar with this poor person who wrote whatever the caption was. There it was, their caption on the calendar cover. They were never mentioned in any way.
No,
I feel sort of bad.
Yeah, no, Bob and I refuse to be in the caption contest because it demeans our art.
Well,
Bob-
the three of
Bob
us.
I mean,
was-
Bob, whose caption
Bob was
is right
just in
now.
it last week. What are you talking about?
Oh yeah, wait, I was in it a few weeks ago. I'm completely wrong.
That's
Michael,
right.
All three of us are going to be on the
I
other
know,
podcast.
I know.
And my contest cartoon now has 3 entries attached to it that I would not ever want to have attached.
Oh, I thought they were Bob. I thought those were great captions.
They
I
don't
thought my
match.
captions sucked, and your captions
Wrong.
were
No,
they
mine
were
don't
great.
match the drawing at all.
Well, your drawing was wrong. You did not need to have everyone else, every other jack-o'-lantern sad.
Well,
You were
if-
gilding the
if they
cartoon
are
lily.
sad, so the captions that they entered won't match the fact that everyone
I know.
in the room is sad.
You overdrew it.
My caption
again.
was, well, I'll tell you what my caption was.
All right,
It's
let's hear
Wait,
it.
are you allowed to do this before the?
Well, it's already over.
David, we can do whatever we want.
Yeah, we
this
run
is our
this place.
universe.
They violate every NDA.
We are violators.
Oh no!
Well, the contest
Yeah.
is already.
You're gonna start a rumble, and I'm gonna get off.
Beth Lawler is going to slap Bob, and Bob is going to love it.
So, the caption that I was talking about, that was a George Booth cartoon from mid-1970s that was in the big book, which I like so much because it is so much like the cartoons. Because my grandparents, I would always visit them. They lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and they were, he was like my grandfather worked in like a mechanical big business. He was a sales guy at this place called Lindy that did all these like post-war. He was in the war, then he was in this mechanical engine, and he was like a sales guy. And my grandmother was a school teacher, and she stayed home when she wasn't a school teacher later on, and they lived in a suburban house in Pittsburgh. So I'd go and visit them, and it was like this very, very like 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, like what you see in the movies. Like I would go to this house in the 80s and 90s, and things hadn't changed since the 60s in a house like this. And my grandmother and grandfather both loved cartoons. They'd cut out the cartoons, they put them on the refrigerator, which they always called the Frigidaire. Which for my entire life, I always thought every refrigerator was called a Frigidaire. I didn't realize it was a brand name of refrigerator until I was like in college. Anyway, so but they always would cut out the cartoons, and then when they passed away, I got many of the cartoons from when we pack it up, and I had them laminated, and I have the cartoons in my kitchen up on the magnet. So I love the old cartoons. And they would laugh, and they would say, like, "Lo, look at this." And they always liked a certain type of cartoon, and it was always kind of like the regular guy or the married couple, like, and life is dealing them a bad hand, and they always zip back with a funny joke or something. Everything was always terrible, but then there was always a twist, and they just thought that was. And this is a really funny, great caption from a George Booth, and it's a guy in a car, and the other guy is mad at him because he's aimed at his car, and the caption is long, and it goes, "The air I breathe is filthy, my food is poisoned, my automobile is a gas-guzzling behemoth, My school taxes have doubled. The Internal Revenue Service plans to take the fillings out of my teeth. My wife is 53 and pregnant. My dog bit a lawyer's kid. My son steals. My mother-in-law is a communist. My daughter ran off with a fink. And now you tell me that if I don't back up and let you have the right of way, I'll be in trouble? And I love that. That's
I
great.
could so see that in the magazine right now, really.
It's like, you don't know how bad my life is, that this is the best part of it today.
Well,
I love that.
Oh, that's so great.
Sorry, at this point, I have to make a case for the sparse George Booth, because I prefer the ones where it's just kind of this scraggly line and there's not a lot there, or I like his white space.
Those were great too, yeah.
Yes. So my favorite is there's this like attractive young lady walking down the street, and it looks like New York, and there's this kind of goofy looking guy just sitting on the side on the steps, and there's a woman, like obviously his mother.
His mother, yeah. We
and
know where
she's
you're going
saying,
with this one.
"Whistle, you stupid bastard."
Right. I think it's "you dumb bastard," actually.
You dumb bastard. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Whistle, you dumb bastard.
Whistle, you dumb
You took out that one syllable, and then there's a dog looking disapprovingly at the whole... No,
there's a cat.
That's right.
There's a cat stuck in the corner staring away from you, which I found that very amazing. I go,
yeah, I got
really,
it right
George,
here.
you just got to put a cat anywhere.
Whistle, you dumb bastard.
Whistle, you dumb bastard.
It's a great one. And I love them. He had this great recurring set of characters. You know, the mechanic, I think, is always so funny. And I think that actually, it's a universal thing. I think, Bob, you should always be making cartoons about mechanics, because your life is constantly at the auto shop with
this
your
is true. Until you get rid of that
Cooper,
you'll...
He's done the best mechanic cartoons. You had the feeling like he's done it all there. Like that category is just exhausted.
Yes, there's no man in the bathtub.
But you would think he'd done it all, but then the Nick Downs came up with the
genius bar.
The genius bar at the
that's a favorite.
Shabby garage. That
me and Nick and David, along with Robert Layton, occasionally get together in Midtown, and we go through our batches, and we discuss our work, and we try to help each other with our punchlines, and it's one of the best parts of the month.
Yeah, I think because we haven't seen each other a lot in the pandemic, my production has fallen off. So let's get back to it.
I know. One of my favorite cartoonists is Charles Saxon.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember you, me, and George going up to Columbia University, where they have an archive of Mr. Saxon's work. And this is the side of George that people might not know. But he was a great scholar of the different cartoon styles, and he was very open to different people's style that you wouldn't associate with his own. He was quite the student of it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Karen Green, I guess, was letting us... She's the curator, right?
Correct.
Of the Columbia.
I did it through her, and then I knew that George wanted to go, and then you wanted to go, and I'm a huge fan.
Right, and
There
Sarah
was a great
came with.
day, although I can't remember it totally because it's been now many years. That was a while ago.
That was a while back, but yeah, those originals, those Saxon originals were just so amazing.
Yeah.
So is there a Booth Foundation in the offing, or a Booth Museum, or I would guess there's like a vast treasure trove of Boothian.
I would hope so. I know that Sarah has thought about, the legacy, but she's got so much that she's thinking about right now. I know she wants to put together a memorial for George fairly soon. I don't know what the Booth legacy is really just inside all of us. Let's face it.
I think it needs a museum in Fairfax, Missouri. I mean, let's get something going out there.
What, next to the Piggly Wiggly?
That was a
I
great
love
photo. The photo that you sent, Shaw, of you in Booth, that was a very nice picture. Is that is that the first time you met him?
That's the only time I met him.
And what was the story behind that photo?
So I came out for one of the very early iterations of the New Yorker Festival. And one of my only goals was to meet George Booth. And I want to say I had one of the cartoon issues where they had the fold out, where they were all in tuxedos.
Uh-huh.
And I was hell-bent on getting him to sign it for me. So he was presenting somewhere, and he was kind of funny in the way he would present, because he would start drawing something and just draw like a little bit and look at it and start laughing. And you're like, come on, George, keep drawing. I think that's a dog. But then he ended up drawing a dog staring at you. So I basically accosted him and said, George, you're a god. I love you. I'm your biggest fan. I'm from Missouri, too. And could you take my picture? Would you take my picture? And someone did. He says, well, all right.
I thought you wanted George to take your picture. I'll stand over here, George.
I wanted George in my picture. Yeah, it was really funny. That was my only goal the first time I came to New York as a New Yorker cartoonist, was to meet Mr. Booth.
And you did it. I
did it. Because he is an icon. I mean, there's not many cartoonists that reach the icon state of existence.
Like a half dozen, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and as I said, this is ironic. As I tell Bob all the time, all my favorite cartoonists are dead, and that streak continues. So there you go.
So in other words, we don't be fans of us. That's the
exactly.
You don't want Shaw to like you too much.
Me being your biggest fan is the kiss of death.
He's the Andy Dick of cartooning.
I like to think of myself as the Ebola of cartoon fans. Because once I latch onto you, that's it.
A lot of people had stories about George Booth, about being so friendly and stuff in the green room of the New Yorker offices, things like that. But as I had some time to spend time with him separately, I would hear different stories that were a little bit different. Stories about how long it took him to get into the New Yorker. And David, I was hoping you could refresh my memory about his story, because I don't think people know that it took him many years before he broke in, actually.
I can't tell. I don't know what the real chronology of it was. I mean, I know that he came in with Garrity in '69, I guess. But I mean, like almost every other cartoonist back then, it was years and years of submitting. But he was in a lot of other magazines in the
yes.
He wasn't
coming in. He was coming in from Stony Brook, taking the train, and it had been, I think it was 8 years of doing that before he. I hope someone corrects me. I'm not trying to be a know-it-all here. I'm just trying to go by my memory from Sid Harris. I remember Sid Harris talking to me about it, because he felt he was a big pivotal moment in George's career, because George was taking the train, and he told George that his drawings looked too clean, that the line work was just too smooth, and it wasn't distinct enough. And he suggested to George to do his batches instead on the train ride in, to get the squiggly line. And Sid felt that all of a sudden, when George would come into the green room and show what was going to be submitted, he felt, this is now Sid talking because I was not there, he felt that the batches came to life with these motion lines and this irregular line work. And all of a sudden, George became very distinct.
Yeah, no, I could see that totally happening. And from Sid, because his style is, he's got this wonderful loose,
You're talking about Sid now, too.
I'm talking about Sid, yeah. And
I think, Sid, spontaneous and action, a lot of energy, and just so artistic and has so much rhythm to it.
Yeah. So, Sid was, everybody of that time that I can think of, Lee Lorenz,
Weber.
Weber,
Yeah, and Corin.
Oh.
Yes, Corin, absolutely. Maybe the most rhythmic and most able to capture the image after having just an orchestra of lines.
Okay, there's one guy I'm trying to think of. It wasn't Dodoni, but his his cartoons look like someone took it from him in the middle of drawing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the fastest cartoon in the West, which I always admired because I wanted to do like, the cartoon that looked like it took 5 seconds.
Well, Michael, I used to sit next to George sometimes at the lunch when he was drawing a dog on the tablecloth. I was always shocked how fast he could do his dogs and his little characters. They went rapid fire.
Well,
that's Yeah, that's like Booth dog and the Thurber dog. I mean, with Thurber, he would just draw them incessantly, like an obsession, and he would fill up people's memo pads with just dogs.
Michael, when you do your work, to get your looseness, do you find sometimes you do a drawing and you say, this is too tight, to go back and do something looser?
No, I get tight first, and then I start drawing. So
that makes a lot of sense.
That does make a lot of sense. No, it's okay. I'm not going to get in this whole thing where I was told to draw better, and I was told to draw very straight, very deadpan, and as carefully as I could, because that wasn't all that good anyway. So
And who's telling you that?
I was
Not Marty, is it?
some guy named Mankoff. I forget what happened to him.
It was Marty.
No.
I don't care how Shaw draws. I like.
No, he doesn't. I have a great cartoon for you coming, Marty. Don't worry,
Okay.
It's still coming.
Don't believe it.
Oh heck, I had a fabulous point. Now I can't remember it. So carry on.
Drawing.
It was before that.
Michael's drawing a blank.
I am drawing. I drew my
Bravo.
best cartoon of all time was a blank cartoon.
Well,
so,
tell us. We
yeah.
only heard that story 3 times.
I know. Well, that's all I
podcast.
got.
Well, let's talk about George then.
Yes, let's talk about George.
That's
As long as he's, I mean, hanging out with George, we never really drew together. Well, actually, we did. There's a picture I just put on Facebook. Me and George and Sarah had gone into Prospect Park in Brooklyn with our sketchbooks. This was in 2019, I guess, so not that long ago. And just sat on a bench, and we were drawing. Sarah's a really good drafts person too. Frankly, she could be a cartoonist, and maybe, who knows, now that she's got a little time freed up. But what I loved about hanging out with George was more perception. It was like we were riding on the subway together at one point. I can't remember. We were at J Street Metro Tech, though. And the subway doors opened up, and George sort of mimed it, and saying, look at that. It's like a theater curtain opening. And then look at all these characters coming in. It's like seeing this theater like opening in front of you. And it never would have occurred to me, I don't pay attention when I'm on the subway. I do my best not to see what's happening. But George was just, tied into this.
That's great.
So I heard, this is a story, now I remember. I heard that George drew with a ballpoint, and somehow instead of whiting out things, he would this might be completely creative. I don't know who told me this, but then he would paste corrections over the top of his cartoons.
Oh, I've seen him do that. Yeah, in the Brooklyn apartment. He was very big on cutting and snipping and pasting things in. You wouldn't think it to look at it, but
no.
He was very, and I remember telling him, George, if you got to know the computer, you could be like scanning these things, and he brushed that away correctly too, because he would not have gotten the same effect had he been doing it on the computer.
So did he glue the bits over the corrections? And
yeah, he would just snip it out. He would just like put a little Elmer's glue or a little paste on there, glue stick, and he did not really seem that. He wasn't devoted to like a certain kind of pen.
No, it was interesting. Then I heard that like with the originals, the bits would fall off, and they were like artifacts. And to me, that's really fascinating. That's like it's almost not primeval, but it's
Right.
it's pretty basic.
It's like literal Photoshop, though. Like it's like the physical,
It
actual
is.
Photoshop, but he's doing it like, on the real
Right.
piece of paper with stuff. Instead of like using a tool to like cover something up, he's taking something and covering it up, and that's fine. And that's, at least you have like an original that you get to work from.
It's collage.
Well, did you guys? Michael, you probably weren't here for this, but there was like a Society of Illustrators had that whole, George Booth show. I know that you were there, Bob. Marty,
Yeah.
I don't know if you were there, but they had the originals up on the wall, and you could see so much of the pasting up, but they still looked great. Although not the New Yorker covers. I don't recall any paste ups on those.
David, was he very precious with his work, where he was saving it very carefully, or was he one of those who had it lying around and everything just thrown together? And
Things were very stacked up over there, yeah. There were heaps of things, on either side of the drawing table. When he moved in with Sarah, she had set up, off the living room, there was like sort of a side room, and she'd set up his drawing table and all these shelves and flat files. And, it looked like a very creative, it looked like a great place to work. But it wasn't, there was nothing like OCD or neat about it in the least.
yeah,
No, and he didn't strike me as that fussy about his art either.
that's
No,
my
I don't
question.
think so.
Yeah,
But he was like really, like when we went on this little sketching safari in Prospect Park, I had brought like some water soluble, colored pencils and one of those little brushes with the little water reservoir. And I was showing him that, and he was like, he'd never done this before. He was, not even doing specifically a drawing, but just like doing these wonderful lines and then trying, doing the brush, washing them together with each other and having a great time.
and this is when you were drawing horses, right?
We actually, yes, you weren't there, but I guess maybe I told you, there's a point on one end of the park where they basically had pony rides for kids. So we were sitting on a bench facing these pony rides, drawing, the kids getting on and off and trotting around, and it was a lot of fun.
That's great.
Yeah, George always struck me as like a very internal artist, in that his reality was what he created in his head and it came out, and not so much, he would observe things, but what he drew sort of got like processed inside the Boothian brain and then got produced as a drawing after that.
He had a lot of techniques. I've only seen like a tiny little slice of it. We were over there, me and Sharon had gone over there for lunch at the old apartment, and I was sitting with George in a corner, and he had a couple of armchairs, but none of our heads were mounted on the wall behind.
Did he have a dog? I gotta know.
No, cats, only cats.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
He never had.
So he never had that terrier?
I don't know that he ever had a dog. He always, certainly in that apartment, they only had cats. But he had this like stack of, he and Sarah were just walking around. He had stopped into like a couple of banks and picked up like these bank leaflets and bank pamphlets. And he was like looking for, sort of specialized, industry speak, and like looking for a joke based on, what the bank was saying about how they were going to handle your accounts. So he really just kept, his antennas up and very alive to this stuff.
Yeah. Let's give a little hint to our listeners that Mr. Shaw has decided to get his cat after hearing the cat stories. It's Dr. No Professionalism.
No, we actually foster kittens. So this one's name is Next.
Uh-huh. It's very cute. You'd almost think that you would have created a book of kitten names. Have you
As I say, Bob only uses cats to generate revenue. I use
monetize
cats
kittens.
to generate joy.
Oh, can't you do both?
Well,
couldn't.
I'm working on the revenue. I'll let you know if that comes out.
Well, a few viral kitten videos on YouTube, that'll bring in the money.
If only this cat was grumpy.
Yeah, that cat looks very happy.
You should really send it to an improv group. You gotta get
Yes.
the cats. Yeah. David, can you remember any
Second
cartoon
kitty.
advice that you were given by Mr. Booth? I had a couple of memorable discussions with him about cartoons. Do you remember any that you had? Any advice he gave you?
Well, he told me the story that I think he's told a lot of people that, he was starting out trying to come up with ideas that he felt would sell. And then he just pivoted and decided, I'm going to draw things that I find funny, and that's going to be it. I'm not going to be worried about, what's in the magazine, try to imitate what people are doing. I think that is great advice.
What about you specifically, though? Did you ever discuss your work specifically?
No, I can't think of any time that I ever really trotted out my stuff for him to get advice. I got a lot more advice going into the cartoon meetings in the New Yorker, mostly from Mort Gerberg and Sid Harris. They had great advice about this stuff. And Sam has been like the universal mentor, Sam Gross, I'm talking about for the audience, to all of us.
But for me, George is the one person who talks specifically about my work, and I can't recall anyone else spending as much time.
Oh, that's really nice. Yeah.
It wasn't a lot, but I just don't remember it. It doesn't really happen much. People are busy. You're in a lunch. You're in with a large group of people. But I do recall 1 or 2 times he sat down with my work to console me. He knew I wasn't getting in the magazine, and he wanted to discuss my work. And it stayed with me. And of all the cartoonists I've ever spoken about with my work, his stands out.
Oh, that is great. Yeah, I'm kind of sorry I never really shared. I don't know.
Okay.
When we got
Bob, what did he say? Come on.
Yeah, well, I'm needy.
Leaving me
That's
hanging.
why, David. I would be the guy going to George Booth with my badge and say, okay, now sit down. Let's go through these. Now, he told me he really liked my backgrounds. We would discuss my backgrounds. He didn't have any interest in my captions. Obviously, my captions were not at his level, and I was still learning. But the captions, he didn't want to discuss that. We discussed the way I treated the backgrounds, because I suspect and kind of hinted that I was trying to be spontaneous, like the masters, that indicated very little, to try to get a lot out of a little bit of line, a little bit of watercolor. And he did like that, and he encouraged me by saying that he enjoyed the backgrounds.
Well, they are. Your backgrounds are very,
Oh, I should eliminate the foregrounds altogether.
Yes. So, Bob,
just get rid of the foregrounds.
Get rid of the foregrounds and the captions.
Yeah.
And then,
more chiaroscuro, more sfumato. Come
That's
on.
what my mom says.
Just put a happy
That's right.
tree.
You are an illustrator by training, Bob. You should have fabulous backgrounds.
Yeah, the backgrounds, I have good backgrounds.
In fact, you want to put backgrounds on my cartoons, and I should let you, because I don't do backgrounds. I'd
like to do a background check with you.
Oh, Bob.
Well, David, we kept you on for a really long time. This has been really great, though, to see you in person and to hear how you're doing and sharing those George Booth stories. Mean a lot.
Thank you for having me on here. This was great. I got to see a kitten on someone's shoulder, which is not saying anything, but
it's important to this kitten.
It's perfect.
Yes. Well, it has its own audience, I'm sure. I won't judge whether it's a she or a he, but
it's a he. Oh, his name is Harry Styles.
Oh,
because he's Harry and styling.
Oh yeah. When I'm hearing some purring, I don't know if that's you, Michael, or the kitten.
That's my stomach. This episode went really well. We're probably only going to cut about 80%, right, Marty?
Okay, good.
Well, that's better than we usually do.
Yeah.
Well, well, thank you so much. And
Appreciate it, David. Nice to meet you.
Yes, it was very nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
When I'm in, okay, what part of Missouri should I wander down to?
Don't give him a real address. Do not give him a real address.
Well, at this point, I mean, Williamsville, when my grandparents lived there, had Williamsville had about, I think, 130 people, and now I think it's down to 67 last time I checked. So, yeah, it's hemorrhaging population.
I'm Hillsboro, Missouri, which was about 670.
Well, how close were you to Poplar Bluff?
Oh, no. Hillsboro was about 35 miles south of St. Louis.
Oh, so you were really in the burbs.
Yeah, I still call it well, it wasn't quite the burbs, but back then, I still call it the rolling foothills of the Ozarks for, romantic connotations.
Well, I mean, the Ozarks, I should just wrap up here, but I mean, for people who don't know it, St. Louis is a prairie town. It's flat. You get out of flat Illinois, you go through flat Missouri, you head into flat Kansas, and then you go south, and then suddenly you start getting hills. And
that's right.
And then things that might almost qualify as tall hills.
Well, they become hoots and hollers.
And bluffs. Let's not forget bluffs.
Yes, and bluffs. So I'm glad fellow Missourians got to meet.
Yeah, we'll do the extra material. You guys could keep on talking about Missouri for another additional 3 hours. David, you're seeing how Michael picks up, just as I'm about to say goodbye, Michael always then picks up the conversation, wakes up, and
I'm sorry, my Falstaff wore off. My
springs to life.
Yeah,
my
exactly.
Budweiser.
Let me say goodnight to everyone, and thanks everyone for listening. This was really great. Thank you guys out and for sending me fan mail about the show that you've been listening. I really appreciate that. Send questions to us at, you can send them to my email address at snowmanexpert@gmail.com. Keep sending questions is good. And you could listen for David coming up in a future episode of the Caption Contest podcast. He will be featured there where he's going to talk about what pen he uses and things I really want to hear about. He'll discuss then. And until then, everyone, good night.
Good night. Good night. Thank you.
Good night, and have a pleasant tomorrow.